Alien ships covered the sky, and a voice echoed, "Kneel, human, you remember me." Jackson did. He had saved her 10 years ago, but what happened next will turn everything upside down. Now, let's go back to the beginning. The sky had cracked open like a wound. What came through wasn't just fire and light, it was intent. Not blind destruction, but cold, calculated ruin. 7 hours. That's how long it took to erase towns from the map, to silence communication grids, to turn tractors into graves. And yet, as the smoke settled over the Texas plains, the silence that followed was somehow louder than the bombs. Jackson Hunt moved through that silence like a ghost, dust clinging to his skin, ash gritting in his teeth. His right arm hung useless at his side. The wrist was shattered, snapped backward during the collapse of the second floor. He'd been trying to drag his sister through a window when the roof gave out. Her scream still echoed in his ears, a ragged sound clipped too short. By the time he clawed free from the debris, there was only blood and silence. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just moved. For hours, he searched the wreckage of the town, not out of duty or heroism, but because stopping meant thinking. Thinking meant remembering. And memory would crush him. He found her near the edge of a crater that hadn't been there yesterday. It was jagged and raw, and in the center, part of a downed alien transport hissed and sputtered. The hull had split like a fruit under pressure, glowing green viscera and alien circuitry tangled together like veins. He didn't notice her at first, just another lump of charred steel. Then she coughed. It was a wet, rattling sound that didn't belong in a machine. He turned, stepping over cracked glass and splintered rebar, and saw her, or it, as he instinctively thought. But the word didn't fit. Not when her hand was trembling, outstretched, buried up to the elbow in broken concrete. Not when her face was smeared in soot and blood, twisted in pain but unmistakably terrified. Her skin was the color of the summer sky before a lightning storm. Too vivid, too alive. Her eyes caught the failing light and reflected it like mercury, wide and pleading. She tried to lift herself but collapsed with a strangled gasp. "Please," she choked, her accent barely human but her desperation all too real. "I'm not like them." He hesitated, just for a breath, then dropped to his knees beside her. It wasn't trust. It wasn't forgiveness. It was instinct. And maybe, just maybe, it was mercy. The first tremor wasn't seismic. It was psychological. A flicker in the wind, a murmur from the sky that made birds take off in sudden, silent flocks. Then came the sound, a low, omnidirectional hum that didn't touch the ears so much as it vibrated behind the eyes. By the time anyone looked up, it was already too late. They arrived without warning, without ceremony. Dozens of ships, silent titans, slipped through the clouds and cast shadows wider than whole city blocks. They didn't fire. They didn't descend. They simply hovered, suspended like verdicts over Earth's reborn cities. Not scouts this time. Carriers. These were vessels designed to transport armies, not observe from orbit. And they had come all at once. Jackson Hunt was halfway through his shift at Engine 41 in South Austin when the call came through, not from dispatch, but from every screen, every channel, every emergency frequency at once. The sound of the firehouse radios cutting to static was barely noticed over the roar of phones buzzing, pagers stuttering, TVs flickering into sharp, synchronized clarity. Then the voice. 10 years ago, I was left to die on your world. One of your own saved me. Now I return, not to destroy, but to claim what is mine. Kneel, human. You will remember me. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't angry. It was calm, cold, elegant, and laced with something more dangerous than fury: certainty. The kind of voice that didn't plead for power. It possessed it, and it cut through Jackson like a wire dragged across old wounds. The screen went black. Silence returned. Except it wasn't silence. It was dread. Jackson stood frozen in the garage bay, helmet still in hand. Around him, his crew murmured in disbelief, some laughing nervously, others swearing. Marcus nudged him, confused. "You good, man?" But Jackson didn't answer. He knew that voice. Knew it from a place deeper than memory, deeper than reason. It had haunted the gap between sleep and waking for 10 years, wrapped in smoke and blood and blue skin. He had saved her. And she hadn't forgotten. In that moment, the world tilted again. Not with fire this time, but with something worse. Recognition. The sky had opened, and it had spoken directly to him. The war table in Central Command pulsed with light, tracking the movements of ships the size of cities that hovered in Earth's atmosphere like suspended verdicts. Hardened generals, diplomats, and analysts leaned in, parsing strategy, data, and threat levels. But none of it mattered. Not when her face appeared above the center of the room, projected 10 feet tall, her silver eyes scanning the chamber like a sovereign addressing insects. Saressa Val, High Commander of the Zalari Vanguard, once a wounded girl beneath a slab of Texas rubble. Now, armored in liquid black plating that rippled with an oily sheen and bore the emblem of the Empire's ruling caste, she stood as the face of Earth's judgment. She had become more than a survivor. She had become a symbol, a blade honed by betrayal. Her voice was slow and deliberate, each word dropping like a gavel. Earth is not hated. It is feared. You are unpredictable. You are wild. You are fractured and fierce. The Empire does not seek your destruction, only your kneeling. The room bristled. Tensions rose like heat through steel. But then Jackson Hunt stepped forward. He didn't belong there. No insignia on his jacket, no title that granted him the floor. But the room paused when he spoke. Not because of what he said at first, but because of how he said it. "I saved her," he told them, 10 years ago. She was buried under the wreckage of her own ship. She begged me to help. I did. That was all it took. She responded within minutes. She would meet him, alone. No guards, no weapons. Aboard her flagship. Jackson went. Inside the hangar of the Obsidian Crown, the air was still and pressurized. The walls shimmered with dark violet alloys, marked by unfamiliar glyphs. It felt less like a warship and more like a cathedral. She stood waiting, taller than he remembered, stronger, her hair braided with ceremonial cords, her expression carved from stone. "You shouldn't have saved me," she said at last. Jackson met her gaze, unblinking. "You said you weren't like them." Her lip twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a sneer. "I wasn't, but I became something worse. Your mercy broke the symmetry. It showed me there was another way. I clung to that weakness, and they found it." She turned then, pulling aside the armor's upper panel to reveal the truth. Her back was a latticework of scar tissue, layered, brutal, unmistakably deliberate. "Treason has a cost," she whispered. "They made sure I paid it, and through every lash I remembered your face." Jackson's fists curled. "So now you've come to repay it?" Her eyes gleamed, full of something ancient and exhausted. "Not repayment, not vengeance, balance." The Chamber of Judgment was not built for men like Jackson Hunt. It was too vast, too cold, forged from materials that hummed with power older than Earth's written history. Twin crescents of Zalari aristocracy observed from terraces above, draped in robes woven from magnetic thread, their expressions carved from generational arrogance. The air itself crackled with ceremonial gravity. At the center stood the circle, a ring of obsidian and blood silver where honor was measured not in words, but in flesh. Saressa Val stood opposite him, unmasked, her armor reduced to ceremonial combat plating. She radiated purpose, each movement honed, each breath calculated. The trial of Accord was not a duel of vengeance. It was a right, a sovereign's gamble that if the challenger's soul was worthy enough to endure her wrath, then perhaps his cause was too. Jackson had no armor, no enhanced musculature, no neural reflex augmentations. What he carried instead were 10 years of silence, a wrist that never fully healed, and memories that burned like coals buried deep in the gut. He wasn't here to win. He was here to stand. The trial began with a flash of light and a shockwave of force. Saressa moved like a blade loosed from its sheath, striking in arcs designed to maim, not kill. She tested him first, then pressed. A sweep cracked his ribs. A downward elbow blurred his vision, but Jackson kept rising, mouth bloodied, breath hissing through clenched teeth. Each time he hit the floor, he saw his sister's fingers slipping from his grip, his childhood home folding in on itself, the girl in the rubble, too broken to stand, begging not for survival, but for acknowledgement. And then, amid a flurry of feints, he turned her strike aside, pivoted on instinct, and slammed his elbow into her exposed wrist. Her weapon clattered across the floor. The crowd fell silent. Saressa landed hard, sliding to the edge of the circle. Winded, dazed. Jackson didn't advance. He didn't gloat. He only straightened, blood in his eye, shoulder dislocated, and spoke through the pain. "You asked for balance," he rasped. "You had my mercy once. Now you've had my resolve. That's what we are. Flawed, fragile, but unyielding. You want obedience? We won't give it. But if you want honor, you just saw it." Saressa stared at him. No words, just silence stretching like a tightrope between worlds. And then, without ceremony, without declaration, she lowered her gaze. Her fleet never descended. It rose. Earth, for the first time in recorded galactic memory, was spared not through surrender, but through integrity.